You're not addicted to your phone. You're addicted to not feeling what you'd feel if you put it down. What if the scrolling isn't the problem? What if it's the only thing standing between you and the emptiness you're avoiding? What if every swipe is just another delay before you have to face yourself? You're not looking for content. You're looking for distraction. And the algorithm knows exactly what void you're trying to fill, because the phone isn't the addiction, it's the escape. And the thing you're escaping from, that's what you actually need to look at. Welcome to Unfiltered Adulthood, where we explore the quiet psychological shifts that reshape you in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. If this resonates, subscribe and hit like. There's someone who reaches for their phone before their eyes are fully open. Not because there's something urgent, but because lying there in silence with their own thoughts feels unbearable, so they scroll. Through news they won't remember. Through videos they don't care about. And 30 minutes disappear. They tell themselves it's harmless. But there's a heaviness that comes with it. A sense of wasting time while avoiding something that matters. And yet they can't stop. Because stopping means facing what they've been running from. The pattern continues all day. Scrolling during meals. During conversations. At 2 a.m., exhausted but unable to put it down. One more video. One more post. They know it's making them feel worse. The comparison. The inadequacy. But knowing doesn't change anything. Because the scrolling isn't about enjoyment. It's about avoidance. What they're avoiding is specific. They're unhappy in their relationship but too scared to address it. Their job is draining them. They're lonely even surrounded by people. The phone gives them permission to not think about any of that. To defer. To delay. To keep moving so they don't have to sit with the discomfort of their actual life. The scrolling creates the illusion of connection. Updates from friends. Lives unfolding in curated snippets. But it's not connection. It's observation. And observation without real interaction just makes the loneliness worse. They're watching other people live while their own life passes by in a blur. Digital distraction is designed to be endless. There's always one more video. The algorithm learns what keeps them engaged and feeds them more. Not what makes them happy. Just what keeps them scrolling. And they scroll because stopping would mean sitting with themselves. And sitting with themselves would mean feeling things they're not ready to feel. They realized they couldn't remember the last time they'd been truly bored. The kind of boredom that used to lead to creativity. To daydreaming. To just existing. That doesn't exist anymore. Because the second there's a gap, the phone fills it. And the constant filling means there's never space for anything else to emerge. There was a moment when their phone died in a waiting room. And they just sat there. No distraction. And it was excruciating. Not because their thoughts were dark. But because they'd become so unused to being alone with them that even neutral thoughts felt overwhelming. They'd trained themselves to need constant input. Without it, they didn't know how to just be. Another moment on a flight with no Wi-Fi. They turned off their show and looked out the window. And thought. Really thought. For the first time in months. Small, quiet truths surfaced. That they missed someone. That they were angry. That they were scared. Nothing they didn't already know. But things they'd avoided by never being still long enough to let them surface. The scrolling isn't just about avoiding feelings. It's about avoiding presence. Being present means being aware. Of your body. Of time passing. And awareness is uncomfortable when your life isn't aligned with what you want. The phone offers escape from that awareness. A way to be technically awake but not really there. They tried to have a conversation with a friend and realized they couldn't focus. Their friend was talking about something personal, and they found their mind wandering to the urge to check their phone. even though they weren't missing anything. The addiction wasn't to the content. It was to the checking. To the endless loop that kept their mind from ever settling. And that scared them. Because the problem wasn't the phone. The problem was that they'd lost the ability to be comfortable with stillness. They'd become dependent on constant stimulation to avoid the discomfort of their own mind. And that dependence had eroded their ability to be present for anything. Because every moment spent scrolling was a moment not living. And those moments were adding up to hours. Days. Years. And they couldn't get any of them back. They tried to quit. Deleted apps. Set limits. Put their phone away. It would work for a day. Then the discomfort would become unbearable and they'd be back. Because quitting wasn't the solution. Quitting was removing the symptom without addressing the cause. And the cause was that they didn't know how to sit with uncomfortable emotions. The apps got reinstalled with justifications. Needed for work. For staying in touch. But the real reason was simpler: they didn't want to feel what they'd feel without them. There's a specific emptiness that comes from hours of scrolling. It's hollow. Depleted. Like consuming something with no nutritional value and ending up both full and starving. Every night, going to bed later than intended. Feeling worse than when they started. Having wasted hours but unable to articulate what they'd even looked at. The point was just to keep moving. To keep avoiding the moment when they'd have to turn off the screen and be alone with themselves in the dark. And in that darkness, reality would seep in. The awareness that they were unhappy. Anxious about things they couldn't control. Stuck in a life that looked fine but felt empty. Those feelings were too big to face all at once. So the next morning, they'd reach for the phone again. They realized the scrolling wasn't distraction. It was numbing. And numbing is different. Numbing means trying to not feel something. And what they were trying to not feel was the weight of choices they'd been avoiding. The conversations needed. The changes needed. The life they needed to start actually living. They tried something different. When the urge to scroll came, they'd let themselves feel it. The discomfort. The restlessness. The need to check. And they'd sit with it. Just for a minute. Not trying to make it go away. Just letting it be there. And the urge would peak and then subside. Like a wave. If they could ride it out for 60 seconds, the compulsion would loosen. Not disappear. But loosen enough that they could choose. Because for the first time in years, they weren't running. They were turning toward it. And turning toward it was terrifying. But it was the only way through. They started small. Phone down during meals. Just 5 minutes. Just to taste their food. It was uncomfortable. They didn't know what to do with their hands. But they did it anyway. And slowly, the discomfort became less intense. Not because it went away. But because they got used to it. They remembered they could survive stillness. Eventually they stopped, not because they developed perfect willpower. But because they finally looked at what they were running from. And the fear of facing themselves was worse than the reality. Their thoughts weren't as overwhelming as they'd built them up to be. Stillness wasn't empty. It was just quiet. As they built a life more aligned with what they wanted, the urge to escape diminished. Not because the phone became less appealing. But because their life became more worth being present for. The phone isn't the enemy. It's just a tool that reveals something deeper. That you can't run from yourself forever. That eventually, you have to stop and look at what you've been running from. And when you do, it's not as unbearable as you feared. It's just real. And reality is the only place where actual life happens. You're not addicted to your phone. You're addicted to not feeling. And the moment you give yourself permission to feel, really feel, the hold loosens. Enough to choose presence over distraction. Enough to choose stillness over stimulation. Enough to choose living over watching other people live. Because the void the algorithm is filling, it's not a void. It's space. And space is where everything important grows. But only if you stop filling it long enough to let something real emerge.